vision come to be. Fire burn bright, free the words deep inside of me. By your light, let my vision come to be. Fire burn bright, free the words deep inside of me. By your light, let my vision come to be.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Kindling the Hearthfire. How is everyone? Did you have any plans for a good Midsummer or Lughnasah? It's just around the corner, and we as a Grove are planning to have our rite later today at a park here in Santa Clara. If you're in the area, come look us up. Before we begin, I have to do some minor bits of housekeeping. Right now, you can find us on our podcast on Stitcher, iTunes, Podbean, and on Patreon. I have several levels of patronage set up on Patreon, each with its own privileges. Come check us out and help support the podcast. I would really appreciate any and all reviews, especially on iTunes, because it makes it easier for more people to find us, the more reviews and better reviews we have on iTunes in particular. I also want to mention that the podcast has been rated explicit on iTunes for some reason, so look out for that if you want to look us up there. All websites will be listed with links in the show notes as per usual. Now, on to the rest of the podcast. This episode of Kindling the Hearthfire, I'm going to veer a little off the beaten path. Usually in this next section, I will be discussing what a particular hearth culture would do during this time of year. This time we are going to give a brief discussion about a particular group of beings that are a big part of Midsummer, or at least they are in my experience. Midsummer for me has always been associated with the Fae Folk and the liminal spaces that they happen to occupy. When most of my friends would talk about fairies, a Victorian idea of little cherubs floating around and granting wishes was the first thing to come out of their mouths. Little light and airy creatures that at worst were just pranksters. I don't want to say that fairies are all evil, but some would have been considered such by humans. They are not human, and so do not have the same version of morality that we do. At best, they are harmless pranksters, and at worst, well, their idea of a good human is a dead one, or worse. The Fae inhabit a liminal kind of space. They are not quite what I would call nature spirits, but they are very deeply connected to nature. I wouldn't exactly call them gods, but they can be as powerful at times. I would not say they are ancestors, but they are very old, much older than many beings of this plane. As a group, the Fae are often separated into two different types or courts, a summer and a winter court, respectively. The original terms for these, at least in Scottish folklore, were the She, a vaguely goodish group of Fae, and the Un-She, which is considered the always chaotic evil or darker court. In Ireland, they were called the Aes-She, or the Aes-Shia, meaning the people of the mounds. They would sour milk, kill animals, and swap people for changelings. Modern society has lived with the Disney-fied version of fairies for so long. The fairy godmothers of Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty, Tinkerbell in Peter Pan, that it seems hard to imagine that some would consider the Fae or fairies evil, and yet some of them are. Traditionally, at best, they would interact with mortals with either no thought of the consequences of their actions. For example, the little people who put Rip Van Winkle to sleep, or as tricksters that delight in the mess they're making of mortal lives. You see this with Oberon, Puck, and the rest in Midsummer Night's Dreams. At worst, they're like otherworldly horrors who kidnap humans for use as playthings to assault, torture, or to eat. You can see this in some versions of the story of Tamlin. They might even take a shine to humans, but at best, traditionally, it's a love that a human would feel for a pet, and descends down through the love of an entomologist that feels for a rare insect. In modern literary fiction and folklore, the Fae are generally depicted as neutral at best and close to demonic at worst. There are stories of entire families being wiped out for daring to build their houses across a fairy path, and Franz Barden also wrote how many gnomes and undines, water spirits, essentially mermaids, would try and trick any magician who summoned them into Faustian kind of pacts, like deals with the devil, those kinds of things. That's a modern trend, but it's basically returning to more traditional view of the fair folk. Traditionally, a variety of superstitions developed to keep fairies at bay or to pacify them. Salt could keep a baby from being stolen. Iron, holy water, crosses, and holy word names scared fairies away. Depending on the version, they may also hate the sound of bells. Whether it's church bells or any bell ringing at all also depends on the version. It is not for nothing that William Shakespeare has Oberon explicitly disclaim that he doesn't mind church bells. It's to show that he is not actually a demon. He's actually a fairy, and they're different. And Shakespeare kind of brings that out to kind of make that point very, very clear. Because that was what was going on during his time period, was this beginning of this belief that fairies were actually demons, and this is how you would keep them at bay, that kind of thing. Some people would put out offerings of milk or food for them at night to kind of placate them. But even food offerings were a somewhat dangerous idea, especially if you didn't keep it up. Because while some of the Fae might start doing house work and do things for you if you give them gifts, if you forgot one night or 2 nights or something of that nature, they might consider it a insult and go after you and your family. Just to bring a modern kind of point to it, you can see a great interpretation of this in the most recent episode, or the last episode of American Gods, which is basically, if anyone knows the book, it's the story of how Mad Sweeney, the leprechaun, actually gets to America and his experience during those intervening centuries. Really good interpretation of what happens when fairies are slighted and how they can be slighted and what happens afterwards. Going alone into the marsh was an invitation to get entranced by the will-o-wisp. Even if you were allowed to leave the kingdom, you could find centuries had passed and crumble to dust once you left the boundaries. Their dances would catch any human passerby and make him dance to exhaustion, at best. Yes, there are dances to the death. Yes, that does happen in traditional as well as some modern folklore as well. All of the above aside, it's entirely possible for the fairies to be as diverse in their beliefs and actions as humans. This is just a basic guideline. I'm not giving you something that'll actually help in all cases. It's just a guideline that you stick to, and in most cases it'll give you a good idea of how to respond if you're ever in a situation where you're stuck in fairy or you're having to communicate with one of the Fae. Some fairies can be malevolent, but others may be friendly to humans, or at least willing to leave humans alone as long as the humans do the same. In some cases, the fairies may be more in conflict with each other than humans and act accordingly. Now, let's get to a musical break in here before we head into our main portion of the podcast.
Once upon a time, there lived a king and a queen who had no children. They were so sorry about having no children that I cannot tell you how sorry they were. At last, however, after many years, the queen had a daughter. There was a very fine christening for the baby princess. The king and queen looked throughout the kingdom for fairies to be her godmothers, and they found 7 fairies.
Sleep beneath the vaulted sky. Please, no tears. Now dry your eyes. Everyone must say goodbye. But while you're here, a lullaby.
Each fairy godmother was to give the princess a gift, as was the custom of fairies in those days. In this way, the princess had all the perfections imaginable.
My song is but a wish come true. A heartfelt gift from me to you.
The old fairy felt insulted and muttered some threats between her teeth. One of the young fairies who sat by her overheard how she grumbled, and guessing that she might give the little princess an unlucky gift, went, as soon as they rose from the table, and hid behind the curtains. In the meanwhile,
each cold and distant star bends low to feel your warmth, to see your glow. The constellations pictures born in scenes of dreams. The stars give
shaking her
form.
head with more spite than anger, she wished that one day the princess would have her hand pricked by a needle on a spinning wheel, and that she would die of the wound. This terrible gift made the whole company tremble.
To every hope we ever know, as above, so below.
At last he came into a chamber all gilded with gold, where he saw upon a bed the most wonderful sight that had ever met his eyes. A princess who appeared to be about 15 or 16 years of age, and whose bright and rosy beauty was quite angelic. He approached with trembling and admiration, and fell down before her upon his knees, and kissed her hand.
The dipper ladles out its love. The North Star lights up after night, and you don't need a telescope to feel my words and know they're right. Sleep beneath the vaulted sky. Please, no tears. Dry your eyes.
Is it you, my prince? You have waited a long
Everyone
time.
must say goodbye. But while you're here, a lullaby.
The prince, charmed with these words, and much more with the manner in which they were spoken,
Everyone
knew not how to show his
must
joy
say
and gratitude. He assured her that he loved her more than anyone or anything in the whole wide world. Their conversation did not make much sense. They spoke with little reason very probable, though history mentions nothing of it, that the good fairy, during so long a sleep, had given her very agreeable dreams about handsome princes coming to her rescue.
That last piece was Pricked by AT and is described in their own words, just a quick and odd little tale. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes not. Sleeping Beauty taken from the Internet Archive site, uploaded by Our Media under CC, Creative Commons license. An interesting interpretation of the Sleeping Beauty tale, and appropriate, I think, for this podcast. Now, on to the submissions. This time around, I have a couple of submissions that were written on the Facebook page by commenting on the ad I placed asking for submissions. This first group is from the Beltane episodes. I didn't find them in time for that episode, but I did want to include them. So here they are. John Nelson writes in, "For me and my small group, Beltane is a time of fertility and celebration of renewal. We celebrate with a ritual, skyclad, feast, and a great night between my lady and I." Wendy Lackey writes in that it's about new beginnings and reflection. And Sarah Newharth believes it is about beauty and renewal. Last but not least, Paula Amaro also writes in about the Beltane episode. Just glad for the prospect of new beginnings, and my partner, who had some life-changing health issues, and I were able to get outside and move some energy. Just a little, but it is a new start and with hope to the future. The latest episode also got its own share of really, really nice comments, but this particular one was actually the inspiration for the theme for today's episode. Patricia Lacasse writes, "Midsummer is a very special day in our family. It is my oldest son's birthday, and a few days after my birthday as well. We celebrate with the whole family and have a great big feast. It's also the day that at twilight my 6 granddaughters, all dressed in their fairy finery, decorate the gardens and do what they call the calling of the fairies. My oldest son pulls us down a long driveway with his 4-wheeler on a big trailer. He decorates and makes into a float for my granddaughters and I. We ride to our big flower and herb garden. Then, by torchlight at sunset, we light floating candles in a big tub of water, and the kids all welcome the fair folk and the nature spirits to our land, and dance around the old apple tree in the center of the garden. All the kids have grown up doing this, and it's become a family tradition for the kids to have this midsummer ritual every year." That one in particular was one of my favorites, and I felt that I had to include it, and it was a great inspiration for this episode. Thank you everyone for your comments. Now on to the submissions I actually received via email. Hope you all enjoy these as well.
A couple years ago in June, I was working in the Sierra Mountains in eastern California, and while taking some measurements, we came across a little stream, maybe a foot deep, and I had the fortune to sit beside it for a little while, and I wrote a poem. It's called Beside a Little Stream. Oh, little stream, what could I say that would matter to you? All your life is change, everything moving, following that which passed before, alternately serene and gleeful, cheerfully bounding over rock and wood, slowly mulling over deep grooves. We are drawn to you, nourished by you. Your song is peace, your touch is comfort. You have no need for me on your bank, or the happy birds preening in your shallow pools. Your hair is lush and soft and green. Your eyes are sparkling white, ever moving, ever laughing. Your hands are roots dipping into your waters. Your dress of fine sediment, gold and brown and red, decorated with frothing lace. Deep longing draws me to you. I kiss your face, I stroke your skin. We are lovers briefly. I am submerged, wholly taken by you. You fill me up and over, yet I emerge lighter than before. Rush on, little stream, and spread your love of life. Wander on, little stream, enjoy the sights of the earth. Rest on, little stream, seep into profound places. Carry on, dear stream, bring parts of me with you.
A Noonday Fire, Reflections on Litha, by Race Moncree. I came to paganism recently enough to avoid much of the prejudice and harassment that my elders endured for their practice. Indeed, the only form of institutionalized discrimination I have ever suffered as a pagan is the municipal fire code, but because of it I was not able to have the grand bonfire I envisaged for my first midsummer ritual, and instead was forced to fill my patio with an orgy of tea lights and dinner candles. As my neighbors looked on in legally unenforceable bewilderment, I took my place in the midst of several dozen tiny flames at the blazing height of midday, and set to my meditations. I often feel that this strange exercise brought me near to something very elemental about the solstice that is untouched by the lovely bonfires of evening, when we gather with family and friends for flame-kissed food and the wedding of embers and starlight. We may think of ourselves then as bearing a torch into the night for the wary sun, but deep down I wonder if we do not instead draw night around us for protection, a magic circle in the oldest sense, meant to contain a power that we have summoned but still fear. Moderation in all things went the dictum of sagacious Greece, and in the cool of the evening we can, in fact, enjoy the warmth of a good fire all the more. In the gathering gloom our eyes can peer into the deepest flames to search their secrets. Yet it seems to me that the very balance we pride ourselves upon keeping as pagans conceals a secret about ourselves as well. For staring into a candle flame at the most fevered pitch of a summer swelter, there was something behind my eyes that longed to go blind in the blaze, something that wanted to be lost in the limitlessness of light until light could not be told from darkness, and what was above was as below. We are fragiler things than we like to admit, and our existence depends on the subtle moderation of thousands of equally deadly extremes. Yet we are also explorers and ecstatic seekers, bravers of inner and outer space, philosophers who must both weep and laugh to master even stoic wisdoms. Thus we live always under one very peculiar threat among those thousands, the danger of becoming immoderate in our moderation, and hence foolish in the very depth of wisdom. For if we only sit by our fire in the company of fireflies, or mark the cold of Yule by a burning log, the solstices teach us nothing which we cannot know at equinox. The solstices, I think, invite us not just to bring a balance to the year's extremities, and thus to reinforce the limits of our middle world when it is threatened, but also, if only in some brief moment, to balance our love of balance by doing honor to that reckless part of ourselves that would know eternity in extremes, the part that dwells in the silence of the snowed-in woods of Yule, or stares with sun-wide eyes into Litha's midday flames. Only the most disciplined of yogis could keep staring until his eyes grew dim, just as most of us could not help but rise from the winter forest to seek warmth. But we must let ourselves touch the hem of these experiences, if only every once in a long while. For to be a creature of the middle world is not only to dwell safe within the middle, but to lay a hand upon each pole, and to let the current pass between. When we do this, there is a final moment, just before one hand or the other must let go, in which that hand is no longer without us, but within, no longer only our hand, but another's, pressed in benediction to something just behind our eyes. And that is a conflagration that no fire code can ban.
Thank you, everyone who submitted. If you want to participate next time, email me at kindlingthehearthfire@gmail.com, send me a message, or post on Facebook. Now, on to the book review. This time we will be reviewing Crafting with Nana, A Young Girl's Journey into Witchcraft by Millie Knox. I'll begin by saying that this book does in fact belong on the bookshelf and not in the bin. It's basically a coming-of-age story for the author, Millie, as she describes summers she spent with her grandmother in a rural town in the U.S. While it does tell of how Millie was introduced to witchcraft, or the old ways as they are referred to in the book, it's not an instruction booklet for teachers in the way a textbook would be. It's truly a beautiful story in its own right, though. A book about a girl growing up, learning about life with its many joys and sorrows. I know it sounds corny when I put it like that, but that is exactly what this book is. It's a memoir of 4 summers from an adult looking back and piecing together a child's perspective. And it's very well done and charming. I liked reading it the first and the 5th time. It was a good escape, but also taught me some things too. It's nostalgic, but in ways it's very real. You can find this book on Amazon for about $5 with shipping. Now, on to the calendar. Okay, the calendar coming up is going to be really, really busy. In the month of July alone, there are about 4 festivals going on, and sometimes they actually overlap with their dates, so it'll probably be impossible for anyone to actually go to see all of the festivals. The first one in the lineup is the Starwood Festival, which happens July 11th through the 17th at the Wisteria Campground and Event Site over here in Ohio, Pomeroy, Ohio in particular. And their website is www.starwoodfestival.com. And you can find registration for the festival itself and other information on that website as well. And all websites, once again, will be listed in the show notes as per usual. The next festival that's coming up is one that I love particularly because I get to go there just about every year because it's usually close enough for me to actually travel there. This particular festival is the 8 Winds Festival, and this is an ADF run festival that runs from July 13th through the 16th. And the event actually changes location every year. Last year it was up in Truckee, California, and this year it'll be up in Trout Lake Abbey at Trout Lake, Washington. And their website is northwest.adf.org/8-winds-2017. And just to be clear, 8 is actually spelt out. It's not actually the number 8. But once again, the websites will be listed in the show notes just in case there's some confusion there. But you can go there now to actually register for the festival itself. They also have a food program, but I believe that window has closed with pre-registration for that. But do check the website just to be sure, because there's a lot more information on there about the festival itself and where it will be held, the schedule of events that will be happening during that weekend, and a lot more information. And then after that is going to be the Sirius Rising Festival, And this is a pan-pagan festival which has a ADF presence. It is running from July 18th through the 24th. And it's going to be over at the Brushwood Folklore Center. And their website is brushwood.com/Sirius.html. And you can find lots of information about the festival itself and how to register on their website. Okay, and the next festival coming up, and this is the last one that's in July, is going to be the Chrysalis Moon Festival. And it once again is a pan-pagan festival which has an ADF presence, and it runs from July 20th to the 24th. So it kind of overlaps with the Sirius Rising Festival. And it will be running at the, it'll be in Springville, Indiana. And their website is chrysalismoon.com for more information on what's going on over there, how to register, and where it is going to be located. And then the last festival on the calendar for this time is actually one that is happening the first week of August. It's called oddly enough, the Pan-Pagan Festival, and it is a Pan-Pagan Festival that ADF does have a presence at. And it runs from the 3rd to the 7th of August. And this one is going to be in Monterey, Indiana. And their website is midwestpaganCouncil.org/ppf location.html. Okay, so that is a rundown of what's happening in the next couple months. All right, wrapping up, I would like first to thank you all for your submissions again. I would especially like to again thank Bonnie Landry, who you heard in the intro with Fire Burns Bright. We're getting ready to put the Lughnasah podcast together here at Kindling the Hearthfire. And if you have any ideas, celebrations, poems, songs, invocations, or anything else that you'd like to hear included in the podcast, please send them to kindlingthehearthfire@gmail.com. I would also love to see pictures of your Lughnasah celebrations, or just what your neck of the woods looks like this time of year. Either post them on the Facebook group or on Instagram with the hashtag KTHLughnasah. Deadline for submissions for the next podcast is Friday, August 9th. And tune in Saturday, August 17th for another episode of Kindling the Hearthfire, where we will be talking about Lughnasah. You can find our podcast on Stitcher, iTunes, Podbean, and on Patreon. Be well, and may you continue to pray with a good fire.